Welcome to another Coffee with Samso, where we speak with ASX companies and we speak with the people who actually run these companies. We're here at the UWA Club on the University of Western Australia campus in Crawley. And we've got Caroline Keats here from ENRG Elements Limited. The ASX code is EEL. Currently the market cap's around 20.4 million. It's all about uranium in Niger and copper in Botswana. Caroline, welcome to Coffee with Samso.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so pleased to be here.
Look, in our energy elements is uranium.
Yes.
And I think in this space we're just stepping into this current state where we're hearing more about it, and the narratives are louder these days. Give us an intro to yourself and
Sure.
what the company's all about, and let's hear the story.
So my name's Caroline Keats. I'm the Managing Director and CEO of ENRG Elements. We are ASX listed, African focused, as you've said, and we've got copper assets in the very exciting Kalahari Copper Belt in Botswana, uranium assets in the Timbersoy Basin, which is highly prospective for uranium in Niger. A little bit about myself. I started my career as a lawyer. I moved in-house, took on senior legal, corporate services and commercial roles. I spent a lot of time in Africa. In 2019, I was appointed the Managing Director of Vimy Resources, which is a copper producing company in the DRC. I've spent a lot of time helping companies, negotiating with governments, contractors, suppliers, and working with operating companies in order to make sure that they're successful. I've spent a significant amount of time in places like Malawi, Namibia, the DRC, Cameroon, South Africa, and now Niger. And I've spent less time in Botswana, but I've been there recently, and I'll be obviously spending a lot more time there.
Very rare do I see the credentials, someone actually almost majority of, if not all of your work in this sector in Africa. A lot of people sort of float in and out. I think it's a great experience. Now, what you guys have is the, if I pronounce it correctly, Agadez project. There's an inferred resource of 1.6 million tons at 295 ppm for about 10.7 million pounds of U3O8.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about what that is about, how that the
Sure.
logistics and...
Sure. So our Agadez project is our flagship project. We completed the acquisition of that asset in May this year, and it's in line with the focus of the board as we've wanted to really commit to clean energy and the decarbonisation sector. So we already had the copper assets in Botswana. We then acquired these assets in Niger. Very quickly after doing the acquisition, we converted a historical JORC 2004 resource so that it's JORC 2012. And as you said, we have a shallow inferred mineral resource of 16.5 million tonnes at a grade of 295 parts per million for 10.7 million pounds of U3O8. We also undertook an exploration program both in Botswana and also Niger. In particular with Niger, a few weeks after completing the acquisition, we were on the ground, we were drilling. We did a 11-week program for 5,500 metres. This exploration program really focused in and around that resource that we were just talking about, which is an area called Agadez. It was really, the initial results that we got were really promising. All of our mineralisation is really sitting from surface down to a depth of around 40 metres, so a really shallow resource. Mineralisation still remains open in multiple directions. The highest grades that we saw were between 1,100 to around 2,200 parts per million, and those three holes were located within that Agadez mineral resource. So it was a really important thing for us. We're waiting on the assays for that work, and then we will look to upgrading that resource probably in Q1 next year. Another important thing that we have done at Agadez, is that we have announced and defined a exploration target for our assets in Niger. And that exploration target is really a function of us understanding or doing the work on the historical data that we have on those projects, taking it also into account the drilling program that we've just done, our understanding of mineralisation across the tenements, and also our understanding of the region. And our exploration target is between 90 to 130 million pounds of U3O8, and we're expecting to see grades of between 300 and 400 parts per million, with an average mineralisation thickness of between 2 and 5 metres. So that's been a really important step for the company in outlining the path that we're going to be taking forward. And in order to support that, in order to test that exploration target, we also announced last week that we would be undertaking a drill program, and that drill program is around 20,000 metres for 379 holes, with an average depth of around 50 metres. And our objective is essentially to identify areas of mineralisation across the tenements that are new to us, and also to further extend that target resource. So a really exciting time, and all of this has happened since May. So we've been quite aggressive with the work that we've done, and we're really looking to create value with those assets.
One of the things that in my research for this coffee Samso was that I came to realise that where you are, most people will say, oh, you're in Africa, so straight away, immediately, there's a jurisdiction question that comes up. But Niger is actually a well-established uranium mining nation. It has a province that has been sort of uranium province. So, to me, when I view the company and the projects, the jurisdiction issues, to me, correct me if I'm wrong, it's lesser, and you're in a province that what you're drilling or what you're looking for is known to be there. So to me, it's almost like a unique situation where you are in a nation where it's producing. It's unlike even if in Australia you don't get that benefit, I guess.
One of the reasons, or a few of the reasons why these assets, when we saw them, were important to us was, one, because of the region. So we're in the Timbersoy Basin in Niger. Our assets are basically sitting in the same geology as Orano's mines that have been operating and producing uranium in Niger for around 50 years, since the 1970s. Also in the region, you've got these significant deposits that are held by Global Atomic, which is a TSX listed company, and also GoviEx, which is listed on the Venture Exchange. And they have these significant deposits, and then they're on the verge of development. In fact, Global Atomic, I think it was last week, they did a blast. They had 800 people on site, and it was basically to start their underground mine downhole opening. So that part's exciting. Niger itself is a jurisdiction that understands uranium. It's been one of the most significant producers of uranium globally. As I said, been producing for at least 50 years. The government is really supportive and encouraging and wanting to get mining happening as soon as possible. So you have a regulatory basis for us to actually work with that is pro mining and understands uranium. The other part is that you've got a workforce in the region that understands uranium. You've got infrastructure in place, and as I said, you've got these two giant companies that have got significant market caps like Global Atomic and GoviEx, and also Orano, obviously, who've been operating there successfully for many years. So for us, they're all ticking the right boxes. And as I mentioned in the first instance, I've spent a lot of time in Africa. So I'm supported on the board by James Eggins, who is the non-executive chairman of the company, and also Quinton de Klerk, who is a non-executive director. Both of these gentlemen, are very distinguished in their careers, have a significant amount of experience also operating in Africa and in operational environments. Our technical team have a significant amount of expertise, not only in the jurisdiction, but also they're competent people for the commodities and have been operating in those jurisdictions that are relevant to them with the commodities for a long time. So, from our point of view, I think we have, we're feeling very confident and comfortable in that environment, and really believe that all we've got to now do is get on the ground and continue with our exploration work in order to build the asset.
I mean, that's very important things. I mean, I speak to so many companies here, and I think it's very important. I always stress, projects management and the team, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't take into account.
Yeah.
Especially if you're working in sort of harder places, it's almost like goal, to have that system. One of the things I it's interesting how uranium's now pop its head out to be called nuclear energy and things like that. Do you see the company as a critical metal essential company, or do you see yourself as an energy company?
We're actually both, and the reason for it is that one, nuclear is fundamental to energy, and copper is also going to be one of those critical components as we move towards the electrification of systems that will be supported by clean and renewable energy. So in terms of whether we're critical or not, critical is all really dependent upon supply and demand. And as we increase our reliance on renewable and clean energy, there is going to be an exponential demand as we try and meet net zero of certain elements. Copper will be one of them, lithium, cobalt, to name a few. And nuclear is necessarily going to have to play a significant role in the energy mix as we move forward. So as that occurs, as we want to rely more on renewable and clean energy, those commodities, copper and uranium, are not only going to be essential, but they're going to be critical.
Yeah, I think in some ways, the path forward, there's this fad use of words critical, essential. I think it just wears off after a while, But I like the concept of uranium being energy, because it's like any energy company, the hydrocarbon guys will go exploring for hydrocarbons, and you're exploring for uranium. It turns out to be sort of an energy use to some degree. But
well, both of them, copper and uranium, are both going to be involved in the energy sector, right?
Yep.
And energy, it seems to be the buzzword of the time, but the reality, it's so fundamental in how we're going to live our future that it's a pivotal moment, and we want to be part of that energy transition.
When we start talking uranium, as I said to you off air, we had a chat with Orpheus Minerals, who is doing an IPO, and they're uranium based. And a conversation with uranium really can't go without a conversation about how people are view uranium and nuclear power, because obviously it's a very contentious sort of sentence when you use that. Do you feel like the masses are now sort of adopting it, or masses are now accepting it? What's the right phrase, or what's the right narrative, if you want to use that word?
What we know now is that around 10% of the global energy requirements are already met by nuclear power. UK, US, Canada, Russia, China, Japan, And the other part is that as energy security is also becoming something that's important, following what we've seen with the weaponization of gas by Russia, it's meant that countries are now looking at ways in how they can be sole source provider of their energy requirements, or at least have multiple sources of supply so they're not dependent on one particular source. Uranium is one of those important sources of supply that's going to be part of the mix. And, I think that we've got to have the discussion globally, and in Australia in particular, who up to this point in time haven't embraced nuclear. But the discussion has got to be based on fact, not fiction, and not myths, but science. And I think that, when you have a look at places like China, who have now committed to 150 nuclear power plants over 10 years. And if China, who is a country that is exporting or providing 80% of renewable energy technology to the rest of the world is recognising the importance of nuclear as part of their own mix. And the same with other countries who are now investing, the US and the UK, into new technologies, surrounding small modular reactors and trying to keep their current power stations open for longer. It's really time for us, even in Australia, to start having the debate honestly.
That's a good way of thinking about it in terms of like where it is. But if you were to stand on a podium and be throw a philosophy or your view to the masses, to the world, about the future of nuclear power, how would that go? Because there is still a lot of questions and people talking about, when you have a disaster in a nuclear reactor, it's a big issue. If you have a gas terminal blow up, it just blows up and that's all you get. But interestingly, in the war in Ukraine, that the way they approached the nuclear reactor was that it seemed that everybody understood that to blow that place up is not going to be a win-win or not going to be a win for them, for anybody. How do you look at the future of nuclear power if you were to, put your thinking hat on?
In terms of being part of the energy mix, if we recognise that renewables are going to have a really important role in the way that we meet our energy requirements going forward, we've also got to recognise that solar and wind in particular don't happen all the time. And right now we're relying on fossil fuels in order to meet the other requirements, and those fossil fuels are actually going up in price as well, and it's impacting prices globally. Uranium and nuclear energy is viewed as one of the main sources of clean energy other than hydro, but hydro has its own constraints based on the environment that it's operating in. The reality is that nuclear can operate in a very safe and an efficient way, and the technology has certainly improved over time in order to build in further redundancies. And if we actually go back and have a look at the history and the facts, the number of fatalities that have been associated with nuclear power is in the low end of town when you compare it to other sources like utilisation of coal or other forms. But as I said, if we were going to have this conversation, it's important to have that conversation and make our decisions based on fact and not fears. And I think that's one of the things that we've been sorely missing in this whole debate. And it would be great if in Australia we could have that discussion, because if going forward we want to be able to fill the gap that is going to be left by renewable energy alone, then nuclear is probably one of the most pragmatic and practical sources of clean power that we can actually utilise.
Investors looking in this sector, how should they position themselves? And I think, going back to your answer just then, the discussion, we feel like we're in like a cocoon of information in terms of this sector, the uranium sector, the nuclear sector, where, so you said, China's fully embracing it. It almost, when you list that number of countries that have nuclear power, it's almost all the major sort of Western developed countries are already embracing nuclear, whereas we're still sort of hiding away from, no, let's not go nuclear. So from an investor point of view, how do you think they should position themselves for the future? Let's assume, we're all assuming nuclear is going to be there. So how should these investors position themselves?
Look, to be honest, we know that it's going to be there. Even COP27, that they have recognised that nuclear is going to be an important part of the fuel mix. Uranium prices have increased over the last 18 months or so in recognition of that. And the reality is, look, I can't tell people how to invest and how they should view this market. But what I do know is that from a personal perspective, we have a really small market cap, we have a resource, we're operating in a jurisdiction that is prolific for producing uranium, and from a personal point of view, getting in right now with energy elements is going to give you that big bang for your buck. And not only for our uranium assets, but also for your copper assets, our copper assets.
You touched on my next question. So it was, how do you want investors to see energy elements? How do you want them to view the company and the path forward?
So we're a company that is really focused and disciplined in what we're trying to achieve. We have uranium assets, we have copper assets. Both of these are going to be critical in that clean energy transition. We are working hard to extract value from both of those assets. We can talk about the Botswana assets in a little bit, but we've already done a lot of work on the ground. We've identified where we can go with these assets. We just need to now get on the ground and continue with our drilling program and continue with our exploration. And ultimately, that's how we will build value. And we will look for other opportunities in order to get additional ground. And we're speaking with the Niger government and also the Botswana government in order to give that effect, so that then we can actually have a little bit more exposure.
I know we sort of focused on the uranium, the nuclear part of it, and you've sort of reminded me that your Botswana project is worth having a conversation too, because that's in Copper Belt. Can you just maybe share with us that part?
We have 6 tenements that cover around 2,600 kilometres. They are located in Botswana in the Kalahari Copper Belt, which is really exciting. We sit along strike from Sandfire's Matheo mine, and we also are in the same region as Cobra's recent discovery at Ngali. We've undertaken an aerial electromagnetic and gravity survey that was recently completed. We're just in the process of reviewing the interps for that, and we will go out to the market in a short time with regards to the results of that survey. And we'll look to identifying, what our next exploration program on the ground will be. So again, a really exciting jurisdiction, a commodity that we understand and know, and certainly a commodity that is going to be useful and necessary moving forward, particularly as we move towards, a clean energy and electrification of systems.
News flow. I mean, what would the guys out there be expecting from you guys?
We've got the results of a surface soil sampling program that occurred in Niger, so we're waiting on the assay results of that. We're also waiting on the assays for the drill program at Niger. That information will inform our and confirm what we expect will be a resource update at Agadez, so that's another piece of news flow. And certainly the information resulting from the survey that we did in Botswana will go out to the market in the near future.
Any sort of last pitch, to sell your soul to the investors? Why EEL?
We really believe in our company. We believe that we have strong assets. We believe that our flagship project at Niger could be a strategic asset for the company. We are dedicated in making optimal decisions in terms of getting value for our shareholders, how we spend money on the ground, how we spend money generally. And we have assets that we know can be developed because they're in the right regions, they're in mining-friendly jurisdictions, both Botswana and Niger. And ultimately, from what we've seen on the ground, particularly with our Niger assets, there's mineralisation already there that we're aware of. We believe that we'll be able to find more pounds in the ground and also at a higher grade.
Look, I think the story speaks for itself. The takeaway I feel is that, you're a uranium miner to be, explorer miner to be, but you're in a province that's already mining. You're in a province that then uranium is in the ground, and most important, you can take the stuff out of the ground and monetize it. I think that's very important. Look, fantastic. I love the story. I think uranium's the new conversation to have in future. We just want to give you a parting gift. It's coffee beans from Kick, which is our collaboration with Florence Drummond, who's the founder of Indigenous Women in Mining Resources Australia. And they've come up with a group who provide a lot of services for companies like yourself, Indigenous and sort of diversify people in terms of, all sorts of supplies. So here's your parting gift.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, and let's hope we'll have updates as you get your results.
Absolutely, thank you so much.